I've been looking forward for this conversation for so long. My name is Catherine Robles, and I am the new sales director for VanillaSoft. Today, we will be discussing diversity in sales with Ashley Earle and Casey Jones from the Other Side of the Sales podcast. The Other Side of the Sales podcast is a podcast that celebrates our differences and empowers everyone to thrive. As you all know, sales is about making a positive difference, serving others and adding value to their lives. But unfortunately, for some sales professional, life in sales is nothing like that. Ashley and Casey notice a huge need to support and help develop all those individuals that have felt at some point like outsiders within the B2B sales world. When they created their podcast, they realized there was not enough data to actually validate on where we needed to focus. And so they decided to do something about it. This year, at the beginning of the year, they've decided to come into action and put together a survey that will allow them to gather the data needed and fully understand how our sales world is supporting those that are not necessarily recognized and supported the way that they should be. They partner up with VanillaSoft, Bravado, and SalesLoft, and we're able to run a quick survey that will be evaluating how harassment is being handled in our sales world. Ladies, thank you so much for your hard work and commitment to this extremely important part of our lives. And to begin with our conversation, please tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Catherine, thank you so much for the introduction, and obviously huge thanks to VanillaSoft and the entire team for your support in all of this. It says a lot that you believed in us and really helped us do this work. So I'm Casey Jones. I am one of the hosts along with Ashley. And we really started this podcast because, so I started my career in sales, but I wound up transitioning to marketing. And part of the reason marketing is more my thing, but it's also partly because I didn't really see a career path for me in sales because I knew almost no women. I don't think I knew any women sales leaders back then. And we started this podcast because Ashley and I had experience after experience after experience of being some of the only women in the room. We literally met in the ladies' room at a sales hacker conference. And like our first conversation was us joking about how the one upside to being a woman in sales was that there was never a line for the bathroom at conferences, literally. And when Ashley, like 6 months later, no, I guess it was like a year later, sent me a text message and was like, crazy idea. Would you want to start a podcast? I had just had an experience where it was another thing where it was all men, all white men, who were being featured as like sales leaders. And so when Ashley sent me that text, I was like, yes, and I have an idea. And I said, hey, I want to tell all the other stories. And we jumped on it and immediately dove in. And one of the first things we realized when we were doing research is there's literally no data about diversity in sales. I mean, there's some niche data here and there, but not really. And there's literally nothing about discrimination, harassment, the experience of being an underrepresented or as we like to refer to it, as a non-bro in sales. And so, I don't know, we took up the mantle and decided that was one of the first things we really wanted to do is gather that information.
Yeah, it's crazy. I completely relate with everything that you are saying. It hasn't been kind of my main point of focus really up until now, but hearing so many stories and really lifting up my head and looking around and looking back into my experience, it is definitely very heavy on the male side. And by such, there are certain behaviors that definitely are more dominant in our sales world as a natural thing. What about you, Ashley? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Ashley Earle. I'm the other half of the Other Side of Sales. And I mean, I think one of the big things, Casey hit the nail on the head in terms of why this survey exists, but it's been really fascinating as a journey because we started this almost a year and a half ago, the survey idea, and it's been going through and figuring out, who are the right organizations to align with strategically, how to actually design a survey, what to include, what not to include, and then going through the actual analysis of it, as well as figuring out how to get people to take it, which was a significantly harder challenge than we thought. But I think one of the things I really want to stress to anybody who is listening and who's curious about this stuff, the point of the State of Sales survey was to gather information about the experience of sales pros, just like Casey said, but not to take it to the step of telling people how to fix this stuff. We firmly believe that to move sales as a profession forward, we have to start by accepting reality. And the first step to accepting reality is to have data and let data tell us what reality looks like. So that's really where the State of Sales came from, was we were like, okay, well, what is the reality? What is going on for sales pros today? And we can find tons of really great data around what things are going on at a company level, at a leadership level, within certain industries or types of companies, but nothing specifically about sales. And nothing that went beyond maybe a specific organization or industry group. So it's really been fascinating and inspiring and heartbreaking. And it's great to see how far we've come. And at the same time, heartbreaking to see how far we've got to go. And I'm really excited to have discussions just like this so we can start moving the profession forward. And that's the entire point of this, is to have data-driven discussions so we can start actually making sales the incredible career that we all know it can be for anyone who wants it.
Yeah. It's unbelievable how for a profession that really feeds out of data and that tracks down data metrics, and it's always, kind of checking out how your market is moving and getting to know your audience, that's important. We forget about our own people, right? We don't track how they feel or are being treated in the workforce, how companies are set up supporting their specific journey, their specific situation. So I had the opportunity to read fully your report, and I'm going to tell you, ladies, I'm in shock to see the numbers that came out. 84% of sales professionals have witnessed or experienced discrimination or harassment of any type. That's just extremely high and makes me, obviously value so much the fact that I have been lucky enough not to be in that percentage, but concerns me and makes me want to be an active player and a strong advocate to change that, to make sure that everyone is respected and treated the right way. What was the biggest or the most shocking thing for each of you guys while going through this process? What you guys would say that definitely change your perspective or reiterate the idea of going after that data and, again, providing everyone the opportunity to really see it and start acting against it?
I think for me, at least, the most shocking thing, it was kind of funny when we were designing the survey, one of the things that makes Casey and I a great team, honestly, is in some ways she's the storyteller and I'm the data nerd. I want to get into the nitty gritty. I want to figure out the messaging. I want to get all my fingers up in it. And so I had a lot of fun digging into figuring out how to make this as quantitative as possible, make it as, it's not statistically significant. It's a survey. It's not a scientific study. But I was all about the data and the demographics and stuff like that. And Casey was adamant that we needed to collect stories. And it's hysterical now, I look back, because the things that stuck out to me and have been the most powerful for me are the stories. It's going through and the power of reading literally hundreds of different sales pros speaking their truth anonymously and safely. And some of it's really inspiring. There's a lot of stories about people who are like, yeah, I've never had any issues with anything. And there's just as many stories of people talking about how they were profiled and because they were a large Black man and everyone assumes that, they're a hothead and about to go off all the time. And they are sick of being, kind of profiled like that. And especially given the fact that we we're collecting this data right at the height of Black Lives Matter discussions here in the United States, and be trying to be, this increased awareness of privilege and of anti-racism and all these other things that hopefully your listeners have been an active participant in. But going back and looking at the results when they came through in July and August, it's insane how real the stories of the survey made the statistics that we gathered. I mean, for example, we know that you said 84% of total sales pros have experienced or witnessed discrimination or harassment. You're right, that is insanely high. 81% of Black sales pros have experienced discrimination or harassment. It's 3 times higher than any other minority group. And we know that this is a percentage of the sales population that is significantly underrepresented if you compare Black sales pros as a percentage of the sales community compared to Black citizens in the United States compared to total citizens in the United States. This is an underrepresented group and is being potentially discriminated and harassed at an incredible rate. And this is something that does not need to be this way. It just doesn't.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason why we have fallen into these default setup. And I agree with you. The fact that this year has had so much going around race and how the system is not set up as an overall entity to really support them and enable them to be better and to be successful starts shedding on that light on what needs to be done, how we as a community, as a society, needs to really start doing something and making it better. Stop just looking away and trying to pretend that it's not happening, that it's not real. I want to share a couple of, metrics that really kind of resonated with me, and then we will start diving a little bit more into what you guys find to be more relevant, and maybe we can also discuss a little bit of the stories, because I do agree with Casey on that. And it's that although I come from market research industry, so data is my thing, and I love all about research and getting to understand your customers' behavior and trying to really have the best approach to be successful in the communication where you're going to tackle what it's in front of you. Stories just make it so much real. When you hear a story, it really touches your heart. Yes, Casey?
And I want to, I'm a data nerd also. Yeah. But here's the deal. What I've always been taught and what has always landed with me is the numbers will tell you where the patterns are.
Yeah.
The stories tell you why they exist, why those patterns exist. And so it's the kind of thing where, without the data, I don't think we would be able to really understand the true power of those stories. Mm-hmm. But without those stories, we really wouldn't understand the experience and how it affects people on a day-to-day basis and the real impact. And so I think it's, to Ashley's point, this is why we make a good team, is we both have an emphasis on one or the other, and it's you need both to really understand what is going on and be able to understand the gravity of it.
Yeah, and I'm going to definitely highlight that you guys have an amazing dynamic, and from all the podcasts and the episodes that I've been able to hear that you've run up until now in these 16 months that you've been on the air, you can see it. You can see how you complement each other. You can see how one will automatically bring something that the other not be looking at that point for the same topic, right? And I agree with you. Here's how I see it. The data will just corroborate, the situation. It will give you a tangible and measured way of the status. However, the stories make it more real. And for most human beings, by hearing this story, it touches your heart. It really wakes you up from just staying away and, oh, it's not happening in my family. Maybe I don't really need to think about it. It brings you into it. It pulls you into the whole conversation.
And it's interesting too, because the stories have actually given us additional areas of focus for further research. There were actually several stories that brought up angles and considerations that we hadn't brought up. We didn't include in this round of the survey. And we're really excited. The survey is coming back in 2021. Make sure to sign up at othersideofsales.com to be notified.
Yeah.
But we're taking all these lessons that we've learned and the angles that were revealed by the stories, combining that with the data, and hopefully, like I said, it's all about partnering. It's all about creating these discussions. And I think the last thing we haven't really mentioned here is this isn't about pointing fingers. This isn't about blaming. This isn't about getting angry or entitled or going, kind of in the opposite direction. This is, let's just start by figuring out what's going on. Can we just start by agreeing on what's going on? And if we've got that, then let's have a discussion about what we want to do to change it. What about what's going on do we not like that we want to change? But it really is about these tough conversations, and some of them are going to be uncomfortable, and some of them are not going to have, most of them are not going to have easy answers. But that's how this moves. It's baby steps at a time, and then every once in a while we'll take a giant leap. I like to hope 2020 was a giant leap, even though it hurt.
Totally. And I think you really raise up a very important point, and it's not about pointing out fingers or criticizing what someone could be doing or is not doing or should be doing better than what they are doing right now, but it's just, again, raising on that awareness, bringing the awareness level into every single one, and getting people to just engage and commit and get things going. So as I said, I wanted to mention just quickly these rates that are maybe the first findings that are shared in your report and are just very eye-opening. So I see that 52% of folks that have experienced at some point discrimination were gender related. 37% are age related. 36% is race or immigration status related. 19.5% body or health status, 15.5% family situation, and 10.2% sexual orientation. So these are indeed, as we have mentioned so far, very high rates. The world is screaming for attention and commitment and, a different set of eyes to get things to be better, to be more equitable for everyone. So Ashley, going back to your experience with the survey and the findings that you were able to get, tell us a little bit more about race. You alluded into, the misconception of the Black respondent. What else did you find? If you have any other stories, we would love to hear them.
I think part of the problem is there's too many. I wasn't joking when I said we have literally hundreds. We're trying to figure out what else to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be clear for a second. When you look at those numbers, the number, the individual statistics of the people that experienced discrimination, what types was it? Okay. I don't, and Ashley, you might know this number, but if it's 30-something% that are experiencing racial or immigration status.
The numbers that Catherine read off, just for clarity's sake, so of the type, so of everyone who reported discrimination, 52% of the reported accounts of discrimination were gender related. 37% were age related. 36% were race immigration. 19.5% were body or health. 15.5% were family, and 10.2% were sexual orientation. So it's of everyone. So that's kind of the breakdown of it. If you report discrimination, that's what it looks like.
And here's the deal. One of the things that I think we need to do is look at, okay, what are the numbers of people that reported discrimination? How many of them actually are ethnically or racially diverse? Because my guess is it's pretty close to 100% of the people that reported discrimination that experienced racial or immigration status are people of a minority race. So when you think about 15%, that doesn't sound so bad, but when you realize that the actual total numbers of people who are ethnically or racially diverse who took the survey, that number is actually really, really high. It's like close
Right.
to everyone that falls into that category. And so the numbers,
So
when you really
just to
dive
give
in,
you-
are even more astounding.
Totally. And just to give you some perspective, 70% of our survey respondents reported themselves as white.
Yeah.
So you've got 30%, and I'm rounding up these numbers. The full numbers are available in the survey. Please go feel free to check our math. But 30% of the respondents are reporting these crazy high levels. So that means you've got 30% of people who identify as a minority group. And of those, a significant portion are of these minorities. And Casey used an important word, I think, a minute ago that we didn't go into in the survey that we really want to in the future, which is the idea of reporting. We have no data. We did not ask any questions about whether or not these incidences of harassment or discrimination were reported to an employer or to anybody else and how those were handled. And we did have several people in the stories mention there is pending litigation around stuff, which breaks my heart. But so there's a whole other level to this around how companies have responded that we couldn't even get to in this, because the more questions you ask, obviously, the harder it is to get people to complete it. So
yeah. And I would say that totally this is such a sensitive topic. Some people might not even feel comfortable talking about it at all, right? And that's another point to consider, like what was the level of anonymously or that respondents were going through. Like, would they feel totally comfortable sharing with you the stories? What did you guys were able to see from it? Were they open enough to let you see the full side of their story, or were they still trying to be very, very cautious?
One of the things that we really, really emphasized in designing the survey was making it very clear that their responses would be 100% anonymous. And we asked when we asked for kind of the open-ended question where they could share the story, we included a follow-up question, and I always thought this was so fascinating, that said, hey, if you're willing to let us ask you follow-up questions to your story, put your email here, and if you leave it blank, we'll know that you don't want to talk about it, and it's anonymous, and so we won't reach out. But what was super, super interesting is a really high number of people, I think they were worried that we wouldn't honor our promise because they put in fake email addresses. So we would get no@no.com and things like that, where it's I think it was people making it very clear that they did not want to be contacted about it. And we, of course, honor that. We're not going to,
we haven't even reached out to the people who did say they wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that to Ashley's point, when you guys run, the second wave and you start including a little bit more of context or information and trying to analyze and understand how the system, the companies are supporting these situations, it's going to come very evident on why they would answer a certain way or not. Unfortunately, again, these are topics that are still are just not easy to tackle. And there's a lot more opportunity to be judged rather than to really work together on how to fix it. Or that has been historically, from my experience, the approach that society always has when talking about it, right? It's judging and how dare you? Why didn't you support all these? Or, even some point when it's raised immigrants is like, well, you're coming here, you need to be grateful you're here, instead of raising up whatever problems that could be. So there's a lot of that judgment side of things that for sure will just affect the freedom of people to really share their story. And it's sad, but that's our sad reality. So as a mom of two, I have two kids. Family becomes a super important area of focus. I know that you guys were gathering some data around this topic. would you mind, if we talk a little bit on what were the findings that you got to see, what is maybe, what data is aligning to that not misconception, but that idea out there of, if you want to be successful, if you want to really be able to be the best at what you are, especially in the sales world, you really have to come up and choose between family, between kids in your career. How does that work out?
I think one of the things, we included a couple questions just around caregiver status, whether people self-identified as a full-time or part-time caregiver, and the relationship status, whether people would self-identify as married, long-term relationship, single, whatever. I think this was another thing that really surprised me, was a surprising number of sales pros are married happily and caregivers. I always kind of had that assumption in my head that sales pros are, I don't know how to say it, but not a lot of parents. And especially given that we know that the people who took the survey skewed younger. I think over 50% of our responses were under 35. And yet we know that 46% of the people who responded to the survey indicated they were married, and 34% of respondents indicated that they were full-time caregivers or parents. The other interesting thing that was surprising to me was the fact that it was 38% of men who 38% of men who took the survey are full-time caregivers, and 26% of people who identified as women or a gender minority identified as caregivers. So actually more men who are sales pros are parents than women are parents, which completely blew my mind. And I don't know why exactly that is the way it is, but it's a fascinating data point. There are a lot more parents in sales than I thought there were.
But see, I think that only confirms what some of our kind of assumptions going into it were, that it is harder for a woman to stay in sales and be a parent. And I personally know multiple women that I started my sales career with, that as soon as they had kids, they moved to marketing, recruiting, or something that required less travel and less long hours and, less of the sort of drinking culture. And I know tons, in my career, I knew tons of men who they had a wife that bore more of the parenting and caregiver work and challenges, and so they were free to travel more and rise the ladder as sales professionals. And so I do wonder, but the thing is that's my assumption based on looking at the data. We don't really know. I don't know if it's more that the women that happen to get into sales are younger, or they don't want to be parents, or I don't know. We don't know what the reason is. But I do think that you look at that disparity, and I think that is telling, because it is challenging for women.
And we got a lot of stories too around women who told about, like we got a story that said the assumption that women with children can't travel for work, even though men with children do it all the time. That specific person shared a story that she was specifically asked in the interview, are you okay traveling with kids? Maybe you shouldn't do this. And she asked one of her male colleagues who was also hired. He didn't get asked the question. So there are a lot of stereotypes we know happen. We've all heard of we've all heard horror stories about women who come back from maternity leave and are fired. We got a couple of those. We got stories of women who were denied promotions because people assumed that they weren't dedicated, or they were told that sales isn't for them because they can't do both. We also got stories of men who were dealing with this stuff too. We got a couple stories about men who mentioned issues with paternity leave and trying to take paternity leave to take care of their family, and had backlash from that. It's an interesting thing, and I think it's especially worth calling to attention when we talk about family. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the fact that the United States is the only first world country that doesn't guarantee maternity and paternity leave, specifically pay during maternity and paternity leave. And this is only compounded by the fact that sales pros, a significant portion of our pay is commission, which is not necessarily treated the same way depending on what state you're in. So whenever a sales pro is dealing with the questions around, especially starting a family, there are financial implications that are associated with this career that are not discussed, are not well understood, and are not well advocated for right now. So there's a lot of unknown here that we're not talking about that I would love to see more discussion and study on.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of highlights the main point of conversation here is that you guys went back and ran a survey that will touch and evaluate every single type of harassment that is out there, but there's so much more to find and dive into for every single one of these categories, and it's really one survey on their own, and from there it just becomes wave after wave where you're trying to analyze and measure and even compare data. I would kind of assume at this point that after the pandemic, numbers would just look so different if you were to run a different survey right now that would be focused maybe on family only, right? So people have been able to work from home. Maybe that opens the opportunity for, okay, you know what, maybe I can have family. And it will be okay even if I'm in sales, because there's no need for traveling anymore, or there's no need for, I don't know, just not being at home. So it does matter, obviously, kind of what is going on in the world. I think as well it's important to highlight right now that the survey that you guys run was based out of the US. Is this correct?
No, so I think the bulk of our respondents wound up being in the US, but we cast a wide
Okay.
net, and we even when we weren't getting the volume of responses that we were looking for, we did. I know we are those people. We did LinkedIn automations. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm one of those people. But I just to reach out to, I think we sent messages to over 2,000 people that had, sales titles, asking them
Hmm.
to take the survey. And so there were definitely people in
Okay.
other countries that got included. And that's also why we actually feel very good about the fact that it wasn't just people in our circle and people that we were already connected to that wound up taking it, because of that effort.
Okay.
This is
Okay,
a
that makes
survey. This is
sense.
not a study. We
Yeah.
did our best to make
Right.
sure we were getting representation from. We partnered with specific um, groups of salespeople to make sure that we got participation from those minority groups. But at the same time, we didn't screen for a location. We didn't screen for when this discrimination or harassment happened. There's a lot of stuff we're going to keep diving into and keep improving the data year over year. And these are things definitely to take with a grain of salt. Absolutely things to take with a grain of salt. But the trends are strong enough that in my opinion, at least, it doesn't matter if we're talking about this in the U.S. or abroad. My gut is it's pretty
Yeah.
consistent, or at least within the ballpark, or
Yeah.
statistical significance, even though it's not statistically significant, regardless of the country you're looking at, because sales is sales, and the industry is remarkably standardized, regardless of where you are. We're all doing the same activities. We're all using the same tactics. We're all
Hmm.
facing the same challenge, which is going to go ahead quota.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Sales is sales, and what we're trying, or you guys were looking to evaluate here, was just the sales world and how, as a world of professionals, these very important topics are being handled and are being discussed. Great point of starting. Great starting point for this conversation, and so from now on, it's just maybe looking into those topics that need more data, and again just working with the community on bringing everyone on the same page and giving the importance it's needed. Another so I know that you guys not too long ago ran a podcast where the topic of discussion was selling while being LGBTQ plus. How do these topics addressed in the survey align to the conversations had in that podcast? I see from the numbers that you guys included, once again, we see a very high rate of folks that have experienced discrimination, especially in those sexual orientation minorities group. Tell us a little bit more about those findings, um, how these two approaches, so again, the podcast and the survey, connect and maybe corroborate on findings.
I think it's two ways to tell the same story in a lot of ways. We know the data, we use the data. When we were planning Selling Well LGBTQ, we already had the results from the survey, and the panelists had some of those results. We gave them a kind of a sneak peek. But just like we said, it's all about listening. It's about having the tough discussions. And we know that the LGBTQ community, 72% of them have experienced some form of harassment or discrimination, which is very, very high, which is insane. But there was one other really unique thing about the LGBTQ community that surprised me. And Casey, I know Casey explains a lot of this stuff so brilliantly, but I'll just start with the data and then kick it over to her. There is a huge gap. We're still trying to figure out where exactly it came from. We have theories. We're going to keep studying it. But there is a difference between sales pros who experience discrimination and sales pros who witness it in terms of how frequently these two things happen. The LGBTQ community witnessed discrimination at a significantly higher rate than any other group, majority or minority. So we have a lot to learn about how to better support them. But we also have a lot to learn in terms of better supporting each other as sales reps, because they're the only group that was noticing discrimination and harassment at a rate that is remotely close to the way at which we know people are experiencing it. So it's a fascinating gap here. And that's something I think is important to bring out. Every time we've got a minority group, whether it's sexual minorities, race, family, anything else, there's a lot not just to learn to better support them, because we know diversity on a team leads to better results, more consistent quota attainment, better overall performance, all these things. We know this stuff happens. But they bring so much back in terms of making the community better and the community stronger. So it's a fascinating kind of dichotomy there. And we're going to be releasing actually Selling Well LGBTQ on the podcast this week. The recording is available if you just Google Selling Well LGBTQ. And just to mention, Selling While is actually a series of webinars that we're going to be doing over the next year. So we've done Selling Well Black, which was over the summer, which was fantastic. Nikki Ivy moderated that for us. Selling Well LGBTQ was moderated by Michael Tuso of Chili Piper, who they're both fantastic. We've got upcoming webinars planned for a bunch of other groups, everything from Latina to Selling While Living with a Mental Illness, Selling While pretty much Selling While being a parent, a mom, a dad, Selling While pretty much anything under the sun. If there's a group, we want to make sure we give our platform to give that group the largest megaphone possible so we can better support them.
You guys really are amazing. You are not only ensuring that you're sharing your findings and not only starting conversations, but just enabling space for those conversations to happen for folks that are already in those groups and are experiencing those situations where they just don't feel valued, supported, guided. So I mean, like I can't wait to see our future. I can't wait to see when companies and professionals overall just start acting on it, and we are able to feel a difference, that these folks of these groups are able to feel a difference and start being more motivated about it. So thank you so much really for sharing with us the journey here on gathering the data and for just being so committed to change. It is clear that obviously higher awareness is just key for actual results. What would be then your advice for everyone who wants to help but has no clue where to start?
Look, I think Ashley and I are pretty strong believers that the first step is just being more aware. One of the statistics that like smacked me over the face was that people were a lot more likely to have experienced discrimination and harassment than to have witnessed it in others. So what that tells us is that we're not that great at paying close attention to what's going on with our colleagues. So what we really do encourage, and honestly, one of the best things that has happened through this whole experience for both Ashley and myself, I mean, we're white ladies. So yeah, we know about it from the gender perspective, but we don't know about it and we're cisgendered and we're straight and all the rest. So we don't know, we haven't experienced every type of discrimination and harassment. We don't know what it's like. And so having these conversations, reading these stories has been tremendously helpful for us to better understand and empathize with our colleagues and our peers. And so my biggest recommendation is pay closer attention, ask questions, start talking to people in your space that are different from you and learn more about what they go through and ask questions about how you can learn and how you can help and how you can support them, because that process of learning, it is that first step and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, just, being active in providing that support. You don't need to fix it. It's really very ambitious and even maybe way too crazy to expect that you will be able to change it all. But start small, right? With your proximity, your next world, people within the company. Just be mindful and looking for what's going on out there. Ashley, key suggestions or takeaways for you out of this amazing opportunity of, again, running a survey that allowed you to really get a good pulse of our sales world?
Honestly, echoing what Casey said, it's reach out and connect with each other. Ask how they're doing. Ask what you don't understand about their experience. What can you do to be a better ally, a better support mechanism? Start with the people that are in your immediate sphere and keep getting bigger. Just gradually keep expanding it. Just something as simple as asking if there's a terse conversation or a comment that you're wondering was okay. Asking, hey, did that offend you? Are you okay? And taking them at their word. Just simple things like that added up over time. That's how things change. I mean, you think about the language that we use today has changed even in the past 15 years or 50 years ago or 100 years ago. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And it starts with these little things. So it start there. If you're a sales leader, I encourage you to take a look. One, I think 2020 has confirmed if you don't have an inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, you need one. Because one of the things the State of Sales Survey did prove is these groups are here. They're here to stay. They are incredible and they bring a lot to the table. And we need to know how to better support. We need to know how to support them, period. If you don't have a plan to support them right now, then your team is not performing at capacity. So asking the questions, having the conversations, don't have to figure it out. And I think it's hubris to think that you can figure it all out. But we're all getting there. And it comes with that humility of just saying, I don't know. And just start there.
What about you, Casey? What are your key takeaways or advices for people that are tuning in today to hear the findings out of these amazing survey?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it all just comes down to learning and asking a lot of questions. And from a leadership perspective, I think Ashley's spot on. If you don't have policies and you haven't done that research and you haven't gotten expert advice, you need to. And by the way, that doesn't mean finding the one Black person on your team and making them your diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. You actually need a diversity and equity and inclusion expert, because making your underrepresented employees do more work is not the best strategy. And we've seen a bunch of that too in the last 6 months.
Yeah. And I think, again, from my perspective in being a Hispano mom, sales leader, I think that's maybe where that fine line needs to be very, very cleared out line. And it's not just only grabbing the ones that you have already and kind of putting them in the spotlight so that society thinks you are indeed supporting the whole situation, but it's really putting in place sustainable policies that will just allow others to join your company down the road, to join your world down the road and feel okay, feel supported, feel motivated to give their best every single day. All right, so thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm pretty sure that everyone that was able to tune in got really amazing insights. If you could please just share some details with our audience or of where they can find more information and where they can find you as well so that they can track down all the podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, the podcast is on every single major podcast platform. It's the other side of sales. For the survey, which is the most important part, go to othersideofsales.com. We've got a big link on the main page that'll take you right to where you can download the survey results. And I want to be clear too. We make publicly available kind of the key points, a bunch of stories, a lot of the statistics, but we have the full kind of summary report. It's like, I don't even know how many pages it is at this point.
It's like 30
long.
pages.
It's like 30 pages. Ashley worked her little hookus off, and
We
it's
worked our
amazing.
hookuses off.
And it's got all of the data in there. And we, if you are an educational institution, we will make that available for free if you are intending on using the data for research. And if you would like to purchase that, there's a link at the end of the free version of the report that'll show you exactly how to do that. And just know that just goes to support all of this other work that we are doing, and we would greatly appreciate it.
And please do share statistics, share information, anything that you found powerful or helpful, share it on social media. The more people we can get to take a look at the survey, the easier it's going to be to drive these conversations at an industry level, which we need your help doing. And if you could use
Absolutely.
the hashtag State of Sales Survey, would be absolutely amazing. And thank you, Catherine, and thank you, VanillaSoft, for supporting this research. From a couple of girls who did not know what we were doing when we got into this and have been figuring it out along the way. It's been quite the journey. And I also have to call out our other sponsors, Bravado and SalesLoft, who've also been with us as a part of this, but for giving us the platform, for letting us discuss this stuff more intently. Catherine, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is a joint effort. And so the more allies we get to have, definitely the better. The more people that we get committed to it and doing something, then we will be able to move forward. So thank you again. It was lovely. Can't wait for any more opportunities to keep on talking about these very important topic.